Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at today's Student Invitational 2022 Virtual Artist Reception and Walkthrough. My name is Rebecca Trawick, Director and Curator of the Wignall Museum of Contemporary Art. Before I hand off the introductions of Student Invitational Artists and the remaining program to Professor Ming, I want to quickly introduce the rest of the museum team. We have with us Roman Stolenwerk, Assistant Curator, and we have Andy Hadel, Museum Preparator. So they're both participating sort of in the background. So thanks to you both. So next I want to pass off the virtual mic to Lita Ming, Professor of Art History and Lead Faculty of Student Invitational. Thank you, Lita.
Hi. The Student Invitational, which we abbreviate as SI, begins each fall. That's when interested Chaffey art students submit applications and portfolios to be vetted by a jury of faculty. A select group of students is then invited to enroll in a class in the spring semester taught this year by me. And that's when students dive into research and develop an entirely new body of work to be shown in this exhibition, the Student Invitational. As you can see in this installation shot of the Wignall Museum on Chaffey's Rancho campus, the exhibition is set up in the galleries. COVID has taught us that physical art exhibitions are not something to be taken for granted. We haven't been able to install this show or any show for the past 2 years because of pandemic protocols. So we're even more excited to be back in the galleries. And students had the opportunity to contribute to actually install their own work as well as their other classmates. They learned how to make sure that the works were hung evenly on the wall, or to find the correct hardware or pedestal to display their work, or to see how the lighting and wall text might frame specific aspects of their art objects. We were able to give students this hands-on experience of working in a professional exhibition environment that SI is known for. While there's no official theme for this kind of exhibition, what I see as characteristic of all the work is experimentation, particularly experimentation with medium and materials. And this choice to use a new material or a technique is already a tall order for the artists. I mean, to participate in SI, students have to generate a completely new body of work, but in just 3 months. That's a daunting task in and of itself. Compound that with the additional challenge of incorporating an unknown material or technique. That's hard and risky. So to the students of SI 2022, I applaud you for bravely taking on this challenge, and in such a public way. Bravo. Their exploration of new materials was not pure accident. I did push the artists to challenge themselves, because to me, the mission of the Student Invitational in particular, and of schooling more broadly, is to allow the space for intellectual and artistic play. This was meant to be a space for students to try out new perspectives, and it's good to make students a little uncomfortable sometimes. But fortunately, they did not have to be uncomfortable alone. Throughout this process, the students had the support of many family and friends, you know, because you were there. And thank you to those family and friends, and as well as many help from people at Chaffey. Campus leaders instrumental to our students' success include Misty Burrell, the Dean of Visual and Performing Arts, and Nicole Ferrand, the Art and Art History Coordinator. They have both been longtime supporters of SI. The students and I are also grateful for the other art, digital media, and photography faculty mentors who individually guided students in developing their projects. Lastly, our deepest appreciation goes to Rebecca Trawick, Roman Stolenwerk, and Andy Hadel. for putting together this beautiful show and all of the related exhibition materials, one of which is this exhibition guide and events like this virtual reception. Let me now return to images of the installation. And this is when we will transition to the presentations by the artists. We will go in alphabetical order, and I will show images of the artist's work while they speak. We will have a total of 10 artists total, and they'll speak for 2 minutes each. So our plan is to run through all of the artists at once, and so you can save your applause for the end. Then we'll take a quick break and return for a question and answer section. Our first artist, Faith Antion, experimented with a variety of mediums before she settled on 2 primary ones, colored pencil and watercolor, which allowed her to combine a detailed realism with intensely saturated veils of color.
My work for Student Invitational in the Comfort of Creatures draws inspiration from horror movie poster art, with the color palettes echoing movie posters of the different decades from the 1940s and 50s to the 1980s and to now, and the size of each drawing being close to that of a usual movie poster size. Like many horror film advertisement posters, each of my drawings feature a central character entangled with monstrous creatures. Yet instead of them being uncomfortable or terrified, I reimagine them as if they found pleasure in their contact with the creatures. For example, when looking at the piece titled Retro, the gruesome hand popping out at the character does so in a gentle manner, with no harm intended, as she also reaches out to the skeleton hand above, indicating that she feels safe in their presence. I had also made the conscious decision to draw the figures nude, as I feel it adds a level of intimacy and vulnerability, and also plays on the erotic nature that has always been present in horror film. My work for Student Invitational is intended to be a love letter to the horror film genre. The grotesque, odd nature of these films sparked my imagination in many ways, and over the years, after spending countless hours in these worlds of fear and fantasy, I found that they have given me an unexpected comfort and a distraction from any reality that I want to escape. Horror films have also had this comforting effect on others, as studies show that the staged fear allows some individuals to refocus their minds away from real-world problems and feel a sense of control. The characters featured in this work are ultimately a representation of myself. Like me, they find solace in the wacky, dark fantasies. Thank you.
Prior to SI, Justin Braden specialized in drawings, but here he decided to take on the challenge of making paintings in acrylic. But he didn't stop there. He continued by building up the surface of each canvas with an additional collaged element.
The 2 paintings in the exhibition were inspired by a trip to New York City a few years ago. The first canvas, Cityscape, seeks to capture the feeling I had walking around the city. I placed tall buildings alongside smaller buildings, mixed together hospitals, hotels, and businesses, and put advertisements on the sides of some of the buildings. My second painting, Underground, depicts an imaginary ancient city set in a cave filled with stalactites and stalagmites, and a stream flowing through it. I wanted to incorporate Aztec and Mayan elements that I recently learned about in a Mesoamerican art class. I kept the underground setting, but added a triangle-shaped wall as viewed from a head-on point of view. Up top, sitting in the center of buildings and columns, is a small stone figure, which shows power and wealth during its active years. Below is a village with stalagmites growing into the old walls, of the buildings. Although you cannot see them, there are more structures inside the cave waiting to be found by explorers of this lost ancient site. For this project, I challenged myself to explore different types of perspective drawings using both 1-point and 2-point perspectives. In addition, I experimented with 2 materials that I have never used before: acrylic paint and tissue paper. I adhered the tissue paper to the surface of the canvas with watered down glue to add texture to the stalagmites and stalactites, or to suggest movement of the sun and the river. Thank you.
Our third artist today, Melanie Delaney, created a series of work deeply rooted in a place, but also enhanced with a bit of magic. She experimented with many mediums in an effort to achieve a naturalistic illustration-like style and landed on oil pastels and colored pencil.
This collection of drawings all began when an image of a bear playing an accordion popped into my head. This enchanting bear made me wonder, what kind of music is he playing? Where is he? Is he playing alone? After a bit of research, I ultimately decided to set the scene in the Swiss Alps, home to both brown bears and accordion-laced alpine folk, a musical genre originating in the Western Alps. Once the setting was decided, I chose other animals native to the region to perform with the brown bear. To the left, there is a raccoon with a clarinet playing with the brown bear. The middle piece depicts a red deer with an upright bass, a mountain hare with a mandolin, and a red fox with a fiddle. The last piece on the right showcases 2 marmots with alpenhorns. While animals standing upright playing instruments is unrealistic, I tried to blend in some realistic attributes to make these works convincing. Not only are their facial features of these animals rendered to appear somewhat realistic, I also included qualities about them that are true to real life. For example, mountain hares are a gray-brown color in the summer and change to an almost completely white coat with the exception of their black-tipped ears in the winter in order to camouflage in their current surroundings. In the marmot piece, I tried to include some perspective through the steep mountainside landscape to express the true length of the 12-foot length of the alpenhorns. I knew from the start that I wanted my body of work to evoke a sort of lighthearted and whimsical escape from reality. All the while, I wanted it to be reminiscent of childhood, a time in our lives that's filled with so much magic and wonder. I thought, what better way to do this than to create a collection of works that emulate something that we've all likely shared and still cherish from our childhoods in one way or another: children's storybooks. Thank you.
Abby Erickson works in a digital medium, meaning that her drawings were created using computer software and then printed. For this project, she experimented with new digital tools to flesh out a complex character world with layers of color, shadow, and modeling.
I grew up participating in theater, where storytelling is a creative foundation. I create characters because the process helps me to feel a sense of control over the world around me. The work shown in this exhibition showcases characters from my original story, Abnormality, which has been in development since my childhood. Modeled after tarot cards, each print offers a concise snapshot of a single character and serves as a window into their complex storyline. Each character was designed to represent difficult events or themes in my life. For example, Radio, my persona. As the daughter of Plague and Lyra, she is an extremely powerful individual. Her most notable feature includes the radio head, given to her by her father as an experiment. I created Radio in high school as a way to process my changing world and figure out who I was. Her swappable heads represent 2 things: my difficulty with being the person I felt I had to be, represented by the human head, and being my genuine self as the radio. Now that I am older and more secure, Radio is able to use both of her heads in tandem without feeling trapped to either one. My process for creating digital art is similar to my traditional art process. However, I find I have more creative freedom with digital art. As someone who finds it difficult to keep an organized space, I like how the digital medium allows me to keep my workspace simple, while also offering a broad scope of tools to expand my artistic process. With digital art programs, I can freely experiment with different brushes, perspective tools, and lighting effects without too much commitment. Each piece follows a similar formula. The character in the center situated in an environment related to their story, either literally or figuratively. Plague's piece is my favorite example of this process. A new technique I developed for this specific body of work is the use of the watercolor brush to add soft lavender shadows over a multiply layer. What this does is creates a darkened midpoint blend between the color I'm using and the color beneath it to create a shadow. And the watercolor brush allows for a painterly rendering. Plague's piece takes place on a stage to represent his overall story, where Plague must put on a show to keep a connection with Lyra, his wife, and Death, his own brother. The figure seen in the background. He stands on the radio to represent the power he holds over his daughter. However, he feels some fatherly connection to her, so he holds Radio's human head high. Part of the difficulty of using characters as a medium for an exhibit like this is establishing a personal connection. I didn't have time to speak about every aspect of every character in detail, so for this exhibition, I decided to include my personal sketchbook and a soul color personality test to help bring my viewers into this world. A big aspect of Abnormality, the storyline revolves around souls and their colors, representing different personality types. The test was meant to be used by viewers to determine what soul color best suits them and would match you with the characters who had a compatible or similar color. Overall, my goal with my art is to encourage others to create and tell their own stories. By choosing to showcase my characters, I aim to present my own story to the public. A story I have been attached to ever since I realized what art really was in middle school. Thus, I encourage others to create and tell their own stories that might help them work through their own lives. Thank you.
Eves Jackson used a technique of assemblage or assemblage, which involves using found pre-made used objects from the everyday world and combining them into a sculpture. As you'll hear from Eves, he turned this a creative improvisational method. He turned to this once COVID hit.
Making sculptures out of clay was something I always enjoyed. However, the COVID-19 disaster drastically changed that, as I lost access to the ceramic studios and kilns. During this time, I was experimenting with different ideas of doing art, and I came up with the idea of making dioramas using various found discarded objects. This result is the work titled Peace of Mind. Peace of Mind as a project gave me a feeling of peace of mind while building it. The content of the work represents the places and activities I enjoy, namely spending time in nature. It was made up of objects that I happen to find in parks and other places where I go in my daily life. As you can see in the images, I repurposed 2 skateboard decks for the base, covered it with moss for the ground cover. Within the larger piece, there is also a number of what I call mini projects. Here is the building titled Pomona Queen Building that represents place to eat and drink. It is made from popsicle sticks and stone and is set along a stream that is made from blue beads and saran wrap. Another mini project in Peace of Mind is the Steampunk Tower. This tower started with a 3-pronged piece of metal decorated with gears, and then I added cardboard advertisements along with a crashed drone and bird nest underneath the tower. Each of these mini projects was improvised based on what I found on any given day. The first mini project that I made was actually in this image of a little gazebo where people hang out. I repurposed a wooden birdhouse decorated with bottle caps that I dug up and cardboard. Inside the building, you can see one figure plus two others in conversation outside. You also might see the black cat in front. Throughout Peace of Mind, there are various species of animals, including an owl, flamingos, fish, cat, dog, giraffe, moose, and dinosaurs. These are animals that are seen in the wild, in the zoo, keep as pets, and only in our imagination as dinosaurs are extinct. The inclusion of all these species participating in various activities in this work suggests the coexistence of diversity opposed to the crazy divided world that we live in. Thank you.
Similar to Eve's, Joseph Kiriakis was also working in an improvisational, open-minded mode. In his ambitious series of hand-formed clay tiles, he shows how having given fixed parameters can ironically allow for expansive artistic experimentation.
Inner Landscapes is a collection of 50 1-foot square tiles made over the course of 50 days. During this period, I made it a daily practice to fabricate, design, or glaze a ceramic tile with the goal of creating one tile for each day. This is a form of disciplined physical and mental exercise, much like the training I did the year before that led me to lose 70 pounds in 2 months. When looking at Inner Landscapes as a whole, we can see that something is missing. 4 spots are blank, yet I did in fact make 50 tiles. Last minute during the installation process, number 37 shattered due to the epoxy failing to stick to the wired hardware. The other missing tiles had the same faulty hardware. While not intentional, the missing tiles makes Inner Landscapes read more like a sentence. This is fitting since each have words to describe my inner thoughts that day carved onto their backs. The first tile I created, shown on the top left, has the word anxious carved into its back. I was anxious to the fact I had to make 49 more of these. I punched and stabbed into the clay with the intention to let go of my stresses in life. And this process of creation was a form of meditation over this slab of clay. I could go on and on about different glazes I used, but I'll just focus on one notable glazing technique: Raku Firing. I use this for many of the tiles because it comes out the same day. This gave me the ability to glaze more pieces than would have been possible with normal glazing methods. You can see a Raku fired piece on the bottom left of this photo. To keep my mind fresh through this long process, I used different ceramic clays each time I made a tile. You can see this by these unglazed pieces in this photo. Thank you.
Like our previous artist, Evelyn Gonzalez Padilla also took on an ambitious project for SI, creating an installation in the Wignall's project room, which is a separate room that is independent from the main open gallery space. This was a big step for an artist used to working in two-dimensional digital design.
When I began working on my project, the media was filled with news about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Could we be having a war on European soil in 2022? How could wars be still happening when history tells us that they do not contribute to the well-being of its people? Wars are something that I often reflect in my everyday life. Now that we're in the middle of another war, it felt natural to focus my project on this topic. World at War is one of the ways I'm attempting to make sense of the chaotic war. It is both a realistic representation of our tragic history and also an idealistic plea for positive change. I chose 12 wars by using three-dimensional dates from the 30-year war 1618 through the Ukrainian war 2022. followed by a black line on the floor to a white text block. My intention was to fill out the entire space to create a more powerful presence of the historical hardships. While using quotes from war survivors, on the wall, for example, this quote is from the Vietnam War. I was afraid of war because war brings all the unhappiness and poverty to people. By using quotes, I attempted to connect more deeply with the viewer by adding a more humanistic element to my installation. The leading text on the project, which you see here in red, if war is the answer, we are asking the wrong question, translates all my feelings about war into a direct sentence. I turned what was just a thought in my head into my installation as the bold text itself became the fundamental form of my project. Previously, I mainly worked in flat graphic elements in a digital format. I built on this previous way of working and challenged myself to add depth by incorporating three-dimensional forms and adding lighting and sound. In this way, I attempted to create a dynamic installation to immerse the viewer in an environment where the viewer can feel, see, and read, to take action in what they have learned and apply it to their lives. Thank you.
If Evelyn went big and filled that entire room, our next artist, Lo Run, went in the opposite direction. She created a dollhouse scale model of rooms in her home. And I'd also like to comment that her excursion into this sculpted and modeled clay is another example of the experimentation with materials that is seen throughout the show.
I titled these works Home because they encompass the feelings of stability and comfort that I want these works to evoke. Home includes two separate but connected environments that are small-scale representations of my actual studio and my bedroom. These are places where I am typically alone with my thoughts and creations, places where I allow myself to be my most vulnerable and let artistic expression consume me. For this body of work, I really wanted to push myself to be more open. I am generally not one who flaunts my vulnerabilities or speaks openly about inner emotions, but I found that making these works was a manageable way to do so. By presenting these miniature spaces to you, you gain an intimate view into my most private environments. The potter's wheel where I've spent countless hours throwing pots, the bed where I sleep every night, and the floors upon which my bare feet drag daily. Home is a culmination of three things that I absolutely love: miniatures, clay, and color. While I had originally planned to make everything out of clay, I made the last-minute decision to incorporate a few other materials. I used real paper towels to make the miniature paper towels in the ceramic studio, and I made the bedspread and pillows in the bedroom out of fabric. I also made the wooden floor of the bedroom out of popsicle sticks, wood stain, and glue. Additionally, instead of using glazes to color the sculpted clay pieces, I used acrylic paints. Home is me on display for everyone to see. These works are my love letters to clay and my thank you notes to the creative process. Thank you for constantly destroying me and putting me back together. And to the viewer, thank you for looking upon my works with curiosity and an opened mind. Perhaps you will allow these environments to comfort you the way that they have comforted me all these years.
If Lo's work was a veiled self-portrait, Morgan Turner's work too turns the view on the self. Experimentation with medium was also central to her series of ink drawings, including experimentation with the type of paper, as well as the display or the placement of the finished drawings on the wall.
This body of work reflects a state of mind. It explores the themes of capacity and quantity in an overwhelming nature, and how it relates to my personal experience with being overwhelmed with excessive thoughts. Like Professor Ming mentioned before, ink is an extremely new material for me. So I freaked out a little bit with figuring out how to maneuver this material in the best way possible. But I found that it was an easier process for me to create a lot of work opposed to just a few, so that I wouldn't box myself in creatively. So in doing so, I was able to create more freely, and I ended up making multiple works that fit under the same subject matter capacity. For example, you see pieces that are more abstract, where I use gestural mark making to exaggerate the idea of the overwhelmed mental state. And then I have figurative works where I literally put myself into the work, just to explain the direct relationship. So this piece is organized in a way to avoid grouping certain compositions together because I really wanted it to be seen as a whole. I chose not to frame the works because I wanted to keep the raw edges on the paper. That just supports the idea of vulnerability, where the paper is vulnerable on the wall. And it also supports the idea of the vulnerable subject matter as well. To me, this seems more organic and not polished because the mind is not perfect. So this work is a personal journey through self-reflection, acceptance, and trusting the process. To give even more transparency, I'm in a continuous healing process from anxiety and depression. I'm a Black woman who's figuring out her place in the world and how to parent my 8-year-old, Gary. So I have daily mental battles through negativity and positivity. So this piece, Headspace, is an introspective into my mind that I think others can relate to as well. Thank you.
Ruby Vandenbrook is our last artist to speak. Before this year, Ruby's specialty was painting, but here we see her explore this new world of clay. She also incorporates objects from nature, which suggests Ruby's academic focus on biology.
My series of work Grounded was a physical and emotional project to work on. The series is about humans and our connection to nature, combining natural found objects and clay. Through art, I seek to become more connected with the world around me. Through spells of severe anxiety and depression, I find myself often disconnected from my surroundings. But while creating art and working with my hands, I found a physical means to help me become more grounded and slowly become reconnected with the world around me again. Before embarking on my new body of work, I had primarily worked in 2D media such as acrylic paint and watercolor paint, but I found working with clay to be much more of a physical and personal means to create. The main figure in my series, In Much Needed Rest, shows the process of death and returning back into the earth. The figure is embedded in moss, peacefully decomposing and embracing death as they are becoming one with the nature around them. In the poplar tree, the main figure is a curled over body with a branch growing out of them. The body is what's left of their past life as they grow into a new form of a tree, expressing growth through pain and moving on. My third piece, titled Enveloped, is surrounded by a cocoon. In this protective state, they are left to go through their metamorphosis into the next stage of their life. Each figure is going through a process of change and development, changes such as rebirth, death, and growth. All natural processes every living being goes through on this earth. My goal for all my pieces in my series was to have them look as natural as possible, as if they belonged in a natural setting. To create more of a natural feeling, I often left the clay unglazed or even unfired in my pieces. I even incorporated found natural objects such as tree branches and bones. The natural objects in my pieces were all found on nature walks I take when I feel depressed or anxious. I wanted to incorporate them in my work as a way of creating something beautiful from times in which I felt my lowest. Hopefully my series makes you feel a little bit more at home in nature and grounded as well. Thank you.
I am going to give a quick recap of the artist to help us get our bearings, and then we'll get into your questions. So as I opened with, I think this idea of experimentation with medium and material is a way to tie together all of the works, whether it was Ruby's move to clay after working in 2D, or Lowe's turn to mini clay sculptures after throwing pots, or Eve's shift away from clay altogether and turn to found objects. We also saw how artists like Melanie and faith were searching for just the right combination of colored media to achieve the realism that they sought. There was also Justin's use of glued tissue sculptural elements to his otherwise flat paintings. You saw how Abby discovered new digital ways to enhance her animated characters, and how other artists like Evelyn dispensed with the digital tools altogether to construct a 3D installation. Finally, we observed in Joseph's work, as well as Morgan's drawings, the idea of versatility achieved through repetition, through this process of making work over and over again. So as Rebecca might have mentioned in the chat, you can put your questions there or raise your hand, and that way we will know who to call on. So I am going to.
I think Pam is next.
Okay.
First.
Hi, thank you. And thanks to all the students and to Lita for putting together this fantastic presentation. I was really impressed with the work and also the installation. It had a very clean, focused design. So good job to everybody. And there was a few things that popped out at me that really grabbed my attention. Morgan, I'm someone who also works with ink and charcoal and things of that nature. And I was really impressed with your project. I really loved the variety that you got out of the ink. I think all of them together are almost like one drawing. Like, I don't know if they would be as strong without the one next to them. Like the totality of them is very impressive. And I think it really communicates what you were talking about quite well. Those light, can I just have a moment with those like light ink washes? Can we just like stop here and just have a moment? But my question for you, Morgan, is you said this is like a material and medium that you didn't have a lot of experience with, or didn't use it, had used it, but not a lot. So I'm curious about the experience of using ink for this project, and as in depth as you went with ink in this project. Number one, what do you think you learned about yourself in using this medium that you weren't quite familiar with? And how do you think you would approach, how do you think you would approach a different medium that you hadn't used yet?
A great question. And this SI project, and dealing with ink, I did learn a lot about myself. Specifically, I had to learn to trust myself, because as you may know, with ink, there's no erasing. Once you put that ink on the paper, it's there. So I did struggle a little bit with, I kind of took a while to get to the paper, because I felt as if, things had to be perfect when I went to the page. So I just learned to trust myself, trust my instincts. I had great mentors that helped me out with that as well. And for other materials, I think it's just having fun with it. And putting pressure. My mentor, Susanna, she actually told me to kind of use a stick with ink, and that's just to play, So if I go to another material, I feel like using other objects instead of the actual material, things like that, just to break out of perfectionism would help me move to other materials. So thank you for your compliments. I appreciate it.
Fantastic. And I'm excited to see what you do next. And I support and hope that you bring that self-confidence of like play. I think that's so important. So I look forward to see what you do in the future. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
I think Nicole might be next. I may not be going in the order that you raised your hands, but I think you understand.
I don't know if you mean me, Lita, but I don't have my hand up. I think it's
Catherine.
Catherine, yeah.
Sorry, I saw Catherine and I instantly translated that.
I figured that's what you did.
Catherine Turner, please.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Yes, Catherine, great name. I just wanted to say that I'm really proud of all the artists and I just wanted to bring up this point quick. It may as mental health awareness, but we should be aware of it all the time. And I really liked how all the artists spoke about their depth into their artistry, what it made them feel like. And I have to tell you, that's my niece, Morgan, and I just love, I've already put my bid in for the picture I want. And I love what she said. And a lot of the art I did feel expressed, you know, a lot of the inner depth, the young lady who would, the horror pictures and things, I mean, and the depth with the trees growing. I don't remember everybody's name, but I just really, and the young man with collecting things, you know, I mean, that's life. We just collect a lot of things. And so I loved everybody's pieces, the tiles, the war, you know, this young lady put out what a lot of us want to say, like, what can we do? And what is the answer? But I just thought it was really good that the artist brought out all of those things about how it soothed them and how it brings you back to childhood, all those things. I loved it all. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody and thank you for inviting me, Morgan.
Thanks, Catherine. It's great to hear when people that are not necessarily their professors are moved by their work.
Oh yeah, love it, love it.
I think that's Stan. Go ahead, Stan.
Hey everyone. Boy, congratulations on the show, all of you. It's I'm really impressed with it. And but more specifically, I find that everyone and the way you talk about it, it felt like a real journey for all of you, that it wasn't just sort of, yeah, I just had this one idea and you just kind of knock it out and that's it. It really is, all the projects to me seem very layered, and that you were really sort of plumbing yourselves. I think it's a really weird time to be doing art in the pandemic. And I don't feel like some professor walking out ahead of you. I think we're all kind of rediscovering what art is during this time. And I think you did really very admirable job trying to make sense of this time. And what you did, a lot of work is pretty profound. Yves, I was so wonderful to see. I know you weren't working in clay this time, and I'm used to your clay work. It's so fun to see you translating just your explosion of imagery into another material. I thought that was really fun to see. I'm happy to see that you didn't hold back and brought that that sort of explosive quality to this work. It's really fun. But anyway, congratulations. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to congratulate everyone and for layered, deep work. It's a great show. So that's it.
Thanks. Susanna?
Hi, so congratulations, everyone. It's pretty amazing to see. And I've worked closely with Morgan, so part of this question is to her, but also to Joseph. I'm really interested in how the parameters that you set up for yourself, Joseph, with the one tile a day, and there's certain things that are regular for 50 tiles. I'm curious what you thought of that, how those parameters could actually allow you to be super creative and inventive, and then like your relationship to unexpected things like mistakes or errors. And then, so I'd love to hear from you, Joseph, and then also I'd love to hear from you, Morgan, because I also know that you grappled with a lot of unexpected things and unexpected turns.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of unexpected things that came up, and I just went with it. Kind of the whole process of making this body of work was meditating over the piece of clay and letting it become what it wants to become, not trying to resemble anything, no realism, just, meditating over it and, feeling what I feel and letting go of my stresses. And yeah, so it was definitely a process. And the hardware failures definitely, were sad, especially, and it was scary, like, oh no, what if the other ones can fall? So, it was, but it all ended up, panning out. So I think it's fine.
I think the gaps in the installation make it so much more interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I agree with Joseph. It's the process of it all, and it's accepting of the process. I will say that my entire project is unexpected. For those that know what my proposal was, my proposal was nowhere near what actually came out. So yeah, it's just trusting the process. Like Joseph said, it's just letting it be what it wants to be. Nicole also helped me out with this. Corinne, my painting teacher, I guess I had a time where I was trying to match my sketches to the actual paper. And because it wasn't what I expected, I thought that it was a problem. But, it's about letting the piece be what it is, letting ink flow how it wants to flow. And I guess it's a sense of letting go of control and just letting it happen. And things usually come out best when you do that.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca, looks like you have a question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, first, congratulations. It's been wonderful to work with all of you in the little ways that, that we've been able to, and to see your installation come to fruition. So congrats to all of you. I know that Professor Ming requires research as part of your process. While the work is ultimately very personal in all cases, this is sort of a general question for anyone who might want to answer, but I'm just curious how the process of research during the development of your body of work, how that impacted your final project and your practice in general.
I definitely was inspired by Onkawara and his daily paintings. So that definitely influenced my body of work.
I would like to say that as a person who grew up doing internet art, I was never really exposed to artists who were able to put their artwork in galleries and in public spaces. And I would always see it online. And I feel that for me, the act of going out and finding artists that do similar things to you, but may not be the same or like a presented style that they do, or like a certain theme that they have in their work, regardless of whether or not it matches your work specifically, was very valuable for me to really nail down what I wanted to do and how I wanted to present my own artwork, because I had many, many ideas. And I went through a very long and arduous process of figuring out how to write about my work specifically and how to present it in the space. And I think doing the research beforehand made it a lot easier for me to decide on final details.
I think for me, when I was doing the research portion of the project, I didn't necessarily hone in on specific artists. I kind of researched miniaturism as a whole. And I was interested to find out that there's actually like a whole psychology behind why people are interested in miniatures. And it's basically, it gives you a sense of control over it because it's something so small that you can move the pieces and you can view it all at once. And so I think for me, it made me realize even more so that I'm definitely like a control freak, and that I didn't even know that that's why I was drawn to miniatures, but I think that's part of it.
I just wanted to show you Lo's work again, just to remind you of the level of control that she exerted over her materials. Roman, looks like you have a question.
Sure, congratulations everybody. And this is pretty much to the whole group. When you're making work, I think some of you more than others, you've talked about the idea of letting go of expectations or control. But I think for any artist, however you're working, there's an element of that applies to everybody. And I'm curious, through the process of the semester, you have a mental picture of what you think your project may well turn out to be. If any of you want to speak to the difference between either a mental picture that you have and what the final product is, but also one layer more, because of course I'm working in the museum, putting the work together where you have a space that's large enough to show the work together. How did anything change? Did you have a mental picture of what it was going to be when it was installed that sort of surprised you when you saw it in the space? Or what was your relationship to the final installation and kind of really seeing the piece in one place, installed, and kind of if that changed anything for you?
I think Evelyn should answer this question.
I think because I wasn't able to go, I guess, every week or as often as I would like to kind of see the space, measure everything. And because I had to print stuff, kind of plan beforehand, it was pretty hard to have an idea of how it was going to look like. So at the beginning, I just placed kind of a rough draft or a sketch kind of in the computer of what I would like the color palette to be, or how what elements I wanted to be in the space. But actually it was kind of more of being there, seeing what it looks like, and if I needed to do changes, because it was very set on my idea, but I actually was like, I don't even know if this is gonna work or not on this space until I place it in the room. So yeah, it was pretty like, I don't know, like, I don't know if this is gonna work or not, but yeah.
I would also say for me, because I talked a little bit about the expectations of the actual work, but installing it, installation day was crazy. I did have another idea of how I wanted to install it, and that did not come to fruition on the day of. Me and Melanie actually switched spots on the day of, and you know, I do think that it worked out better than the initial idea, but I had a lot of help from my classmates to compose the pieces in the way that it was. They helped me hold things up and let me say, no, move this over here, move this over here. And just having to see all of those works be a composition within itself, that was like a whole nother process that I had to do. So it's all a learning experience, really, but it was a great one.
Yeah, it was definitely hectic for me, especially with all the work. And I just have to say thank you to Melanie and Faith. They definitely helped a lot, gluing all the hardware onto the tiles, and everyone else helped a lot too. And it was, I mean, I had to go probably the most out of everyone. I had to go more days just to get everything done. And it was definitely saddening to see some of them fall. And like before, when we had time to fix things, one of them fell that was it had the word doubt on the back, so it like felt really fitting, like doubt got shattered, because I'm done, I got the work done. So that felt good.
Let's take the question from Stephanie Mitchell.
Hi, I just want to say I'm a new art student, and I really appreciated seeing everyone's work. I found it really inspiring, and to touch on what Catherine said earlier about everyone's vulnerability in their work, I really appreciated that a lot to hear. And I didn't really know what to expect after I heard about the student invitational, but I really loved it. I enjoyed seeing everything. I was fortunate enough to see the projects in person with Nicole's class. And I just wanted to do a quick shout out. I really wanted to say I appreciated Evelyn's installation. I was like really amazed when I went in, and just the immersive experience with like the sound and the ambiance was just like, it was just like really just another level. Like I wish I had more words to say how like amazing it was. But honestly shout out everyone because all the work was amazing, and I enjoyed everything just very thoroughly. So thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you so
We
much.
didn't pay her to say that. Okay, Pam.
I guess I'm curious what's next? If any of these, the process of this has inspired other ideas. I know you guys are like, no, end of semester, chill time. But I'm just curious if it sort of generated some other things that you would like to perhaps approach sooner or later, or, you know, how do you think about continuing now that you're on the other side of it? And this goes for all of you.
I think that just for starters, I don't know if Faith, Melanie, Justin, do you have some thoughts on this? You can.
Yeah, I was gonna say my work was heavily inspired by vintage children's illustration books, and after creating all of my pieces, it just made me have so much of like an appreciation, like even more so for them. And it kind of inspired me to hopefully create illustrations for children's books in the future.
If I may chime in about my own steps forward. Because abnormality has been a story that's been happening for so long in my life, I have debated on whether or not to actually go on to produce it because I want to be an animator. And I am proud to say that I am officially starting a comic on Webtoon Canvas. The first episode should come up in June, preferably. So I am going forward with that story, and I think this class was a very valuable experience to have, to be able to push me into that and finally get over my fear of failure to do that. So thank you to everyone for helping me get through that.
Yay, we can finally see Abby, as we talked about combining text and image. Did Faith, did you have something to say, or Ruby, before we go to the next question, or Justin? Do you want to pause and answer another question? Okay, I'm gonna let Cassandra ask her question then first.
Thank you so much, Lita. It wasn't so much a question as I just wanted to praise Melanie, I believe, for all of her beautiful paintings. I myself, I'm actually extremely interested in being an author / illustrator for children's books or for novels in the future. And I just found all of her paintings so delightful. I can see the whimsy, I can see, you know, this air of magic, you know, the playfulness in all of these images. And I just found it really inspiring. And it's so comforting to know that there are other artists out there who have the same interests, or, you know, would also like to create this sort of fairy tale, this magical, you know, theme in their artworks. So I just wanted to say it was really great to see. You know, I found it extremely inspiring.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I think Stan, did you have a follow-on question that you asked before?
I asked it in chat.
Yeah, do you want to voice that?
Sure. No, I was wondering if anybody, I'll just read it. If anyone felt they got in deeper than they had thought they would or could, and were surprised by the scope their project took on. Like they get kind of like, oh my goodness, this is a lot more than I thought was there. I was wondering if anyone were surprised by, through your research.
Ruby, would you like to answer that?
Personally, I found I actually had a bigger plan for my project. So I wanted to create 5 sculptures, and all inspired by biology and natural phenomenon. But I ended up putting more energy and work into the 3 sculptures and making it more about the 3, and focusing on those was much better in terms of time and quality. As a person who, of course, worked in 2D art before and doing paintings, I could bust out paintings like crazy. I could do a painting in like 2 hours, and I could bust out like 5 or so. But when it came to ceramics and clay, it really taught me how to take my time and really put my touch into it and just like, see it from every single angle and like really just take my time to breathe and like put all my focus into it. And yeah, I think that helped me a lot during my series of work, but yeah.
I think also for me to answer your question, Stan, similar to Ruby, I originally was going to do 3 pieces and then I realized that was too much. I couldn't pull it off in time. But when I started making the pieces, I was planning on making them not so personal. I wanted them to be kind of like a broad thing that everyone could connect to. But as I was making them, I decided kind of last minute that I wanted to add these personal touches, like my favorite books are in my bedroom, or like the paintings on my wall are actually the paintings on my bedroom wall and stuff like that. So I think that was a direction that I wasn't expecting to take when I initially started.
Cool. Nice.
Let's take a question from Amanda, who was in SI last year.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say congratulations to everyone. I think what's super cool is that you guys actually had a virtual walkthrough, and I think it worked really, really nicely to actually see everyone's work kind of in an installation, especially since ours last year was in more of a virtual space. So I think it's kind of cool that you guys were actually able to have a real space and a virtual space. I think everything worked out really good, and your guys' work is amazing. Like everyone just pulled off like really, really interesting stuff. So yeah, I just want to say thanks because it's so cool.
Yeah, there are some things that are done well in the virtual space. It does make the presentation a little bit easier instead of trying to stand around the gallery with 10 people. That would have been a little cumbersome. Okay, so we a couple more questions. See, do we have any, Justin and Faith, we haven't heard from you yet, but do you have any future plans for your work? Did this inspire you to continue moving in a certain direction? And Eves, you too, actually. I'd love to hear from you about all of this.
Yeah, hello.
We can hear you, Eve.
Oh yeah, what was your question again?
Are you going to continue working in this assemblage mode, or
Yeah,
you think you're going to go in?
I am.
Even now that the ceramic studio is open?
Yeah.
And Justin, how about you? Did you think you're going to keep painting now and adding elements to it?
Yeah, I was thinking of not just keeping painting, but also using more tissue paper, since that one was my first time doing it. And I think it turned out pretty well for my tissue paper for both of my pieces. And I think maybe someday I can maybe use like a lot like full tissue paper instead of paint someday when I get the chance. Yeah.
Great. Faith, how about you? Are you going to continue this film poster?
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna continue it. Yeah, just most of my artwork in general is just more like horror, spooky theme like elements. So I'm definitely gonna keep doing that.
I think there's one more question from Susanna.
Hi, so I have one more question. Has anyone learned any approaches to either formulating their project or actually creating this more in-depth body of work that you want to carry into future projects? Or is there something that you learned, like, I'm not going to do that again, that was not helpful, I'm going to chuck that? And this is really for anybody.
in response to the second question, I learned a lot about biting off more than you could chew. Originally, my project was going to be much better. I was trying to fit in all of these story elements, and I got very frustrated when it wasn't working out and I had to kind of reroute. And I was frustrated because I wasn't understanding necessarily what was best for the exhibit. So I think it's good to learn that trying to keep things simple is always the best solution, especially when you want to do more detailed work and start adding into your process like I did for my pieces.
Something that I did that I thought was helpful was I did imagery research on pieces that I felt like related to my subject matter, or pieces that I just liked in general that I wanted to incorporate for myself. And I cut them out and I put them all up around me so that they can kind of be in my subconscious as I was creating. And I did a lot of them, so I was able to kind of switch them out as my moods changed. So that's something that I like to keep with me when I do other projects. And something that I don't want to take is probably just like the avoidance factor, you know, when you get kind of stressed out and you just avoid it for some time. And that, I think prioritizing to at least approach it a little bit more often would be more beneficial for me in the future.
Yeah, I think I definitely learned a lot about time management and what to prioritize and when to prioritize. Like I got to a point near the end where I had to sculpt 7 tiles a day because I had to glaze everything and I had to cook everything to get ready to hang. And I definitely learned like the hanging hardware not to use, and you know, I learned some good lessons on what to do next time if I want to hang something, you know. So it was definitely a lot of learning, and it was really good because now I know I can do this and I have the confidence to do something else bigger, and you know, it's only going to get better from here.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. I hope this inspired you to get your hands dirty, to go start working with some new materials yourself. If we're teaching, telling our students go take risks, everyone, I hope will follow that advice. And to those students, Chapey students who are watching this, like Stephanie, I hope you will be inspired to apply in future years. So thank you, and see you all in 2023.